about Sean Strickland potentially fighting Kamaru Usman for the second time. As you guys know, this fight had already happened previously. It was Sean Strickland trying to make his way into the 170 division. Obviously, he is now a full-pledged 185er and has since become a champion. Usman has also become a champion after that fight, in which he dominated the 170 division, only to fall short against Leon Edwards in another rematch. So once again, that kind of brings some things into question. For one, how does Usman do in rematches, right? Especially when it didn't go too good for the Leon Edwards fight. And now he's going into the Kamaru Usman fight, and you have to wonder to yourself if this is going to lend him any good opportunities, right? Considering it's a new weight class. He had just fought Khamzat, looked really great, but one can argue these two guys aren't really part of that particular weight class in the first place. So, again, the other obstacle of this particular fight right now, and we're going to talk more about it and probably talk immense amounts of reasons behind why this fight may not be happening, is for the simple fact that Sean Strickland wants a rematch. Now, he doesn't, it seems like he doesn't want to fight Kamaru Usman, right? I mean, can you blame him? Kamaru Usman doesn't have a belt, right? It's not like he's still the 170 champion, and even if that was the case, it's not like Sean Strickland can make that weight anymore, right? But nonetheless, we're going to talk more about it, and we're going to find some reasons as to why Sean Strickland would rather fight for the belt, obviously, rather than fighting Kamaru Usman for the second time, in which Kamaru Usman is just probably going to out-wrestle him as a result. But either way, we're going to talk about it. And also, don't forget to check out my new video that I have coming out, which is going to premiere at 9 a.m. Western time, and it's going to talk about the game, Jay Sean Taylor, the rapper, who, by the way, is potentially going into the fight game. Now, what type of style, what type of fighting is he going to do? You're going to find out more details about that with at least just the very limited details that I've had in that particular concept. And yeah, we're going to talk about that and what are the implications of rappers going into the fight game. Obviously, you've seen a lot of rappers before try to set up boxing matches or this and that, but very few really do it, right? And we're going to talk about that as well, so hang tight, and we will get this show on the road as a result. So we're also going to talk about Chris Weidman, right? A lot of people seem to be very angry at Chris Weidman because of his win. The one thing that I can really say about that, in all true to God honesty, is that, you know, honestly, anything can happen in the fight game, right? You know, absolutely anything can happen. So you got to understand, it's not up to the fighter. It's not up to the fighter to decide what is fair or what isn't fair. Fighters are going to do what they do. They're going to get in there. They're going to scrap. They're going to do their job. But more importantly, it's the referee's job to really determine what is going on and what is happening. So if the referee didn't see the eye poke, then what are you supposed to do? You know what I mean? You can't do anything about that. They didn't see the eye poke. So all you can really do is just continue on fighting. When it comes to the fighters, you can't blame them also for taking the narrative on their side, right? You can't blame them for feeling like, okay, you know what? I'm the guy that's fighting in here. I'm going to speak on behalf of my narrative, and I'm not going to let anybody tell me otherwise. They said that I was cheating. I'm going to rebuttal that, right? This is just the nature of the fighter. They're going to they're going to work things to their favor, and that's really that they're all there is to it, right? There's nothing to it other than that, right? So you can't get mad at Chris Weidman, but apparently a lot of people are very upset at Chris Weidman. I can't say that I blame them, But more importantly, I can't really sit here and blame Chris Weidman either. So what are you supposed to do? Right? You're supposed to just go out there and, condemn him for taking the win, right? You won't, because you shouldn't, honestly, because he does what he has to do, and that's just what fighters do. Sorry if I'm a little preoccupied. I'm sort of, setting up the video for the game. Jay Sean Taylor entering into the fight game. The video that's going to premiere at 9 a.m. this morning at Western time. So forgive me. I'm just trying to multitask while I'm talking at the same time. But either way, the UFC 300 is coming close, right? Obviously, next week it's going to be Brendan Allen taking on Chris Curtis for another fight night headline, and then 1 week after that is going to be UFC 300, which is great. Like I said, right, I'm very excited for the UFC 300 weekend, simply because, one, there's the BKFC card. A buddy of mine is fighting on it. Obviously, there's going to be Eid, the end of Ramadan, during that week, and then after that, obviously, the weekend culminates to UFC 300. Now, a lot of people don't seem to be very excited about UFC 300, right? Which is okay if they're not excited about it. But I think during the fight week is where it's really going to set in for a lot of people, where they're going to be like, wow, you know what? UFC 300 is here. UFC 300 is going to be on and popping. And right now, just on paper, it's not really appreciated the way that it should. Primarily because, once again, a lot of people are expecting UFC 300 to be this King Kong versus Godzilla matchup. And that's just not what you're going to get in this particular setting, because we've said this over and over again. A lot of guys are too busy. A lot of people out there are just not in the state to fight. For example, Conor McGregor, right? That would have made the UFC 300 card really big. How about John Jones and Tom Aspinall? That would have made the card even bigger. Now, this is not a knock on Jamal Hill and Alex Pereira. In fact, in my humble opinion, I think the Alex Pereira fight is really important. And I'm going to tell you why, right? A lot of people may not see it that way, but I got to tell you, I think that this fight is important, simply because you're talking about two guys that have legit claims to the 205 division, right? And in particular, especially Jamal Hill, because Jamal Hill had taken that belt just right after John Jones had left the division. And obviously, it was a little bit of a topsy-turvy going on. Jan was the champion for a while. And then after Jan had lost to Glover Teixeira got beat by Jamal Hill. So Jamal Hill has the claim to that fight, to that belt. And then Teixeira came in there and lost to Jamal Hill. But then Jan Blachowicz went in there and fought Alex Pereira, who was the former champion of the 205 division. And now here comes Alex Pereira winning his second belt, which is impressive in and of itself. But again, he won that belt coming off of a loss from Israel Adesanya. So again, there's a lot of unclear champions here, right? A lot of unclear situations, and I think that UFC 300 being headlined by Alex Pereira and Jamal Hill is really going to clear all that up. But to the casual fan base, that's not something they care about. Now, to us hardcores, this is how we should really market UFC 300. UFC 300 should be marketed as the hardcore fans' delight. Okay, that's really they're all there is to it, right? It's a hardcore fan's delight, because let's face it, there's a lot of unsettled aspects of the 205 division, and they're going to be settled once this fight commences at UFC 300. But again, the casuals don't care, because It's not a big Conor McGregor card. It's not a John Jones versus Tom Aspinall card. Even though that card, that fight in and of itself with Aspinall and Jones would be a real hardcore fan's delight, it's still not sensationalized enough, but this is the best that they have. And hey, look, credit to the UFC for trying. This is all that you can really do when you have a lot of fighters that are scheduled for multiple events. And by the way, Dricus du Plessis, as I mentioned, is going to fight Israel Adesanya at 305, which, by the way, really brings me into this particular story and the real topic at hand of this particular live stream, which is Sean Strickland fighting Kamaru Usman. It's a very important fight, and let me tell you why. Because for one, these two guys are at the 185 division, very unlikely 185ers, by the way. Very unlikely 185ers. Why do I say that? Sean Strickland was never a 185er. Eventually, he just grew into that weight class, started doing really good, and the next thing you know, he gets a title shot against Israel Adesanya. Kamaru Usman never moved up a weight class. He never wanted to challenge the 185 champion at the time, which was Izzy, because of his friendship with him. They were never really training partners to begin with, but that's neither here or there. He didn't want to go up to fight him. So now the time was right. He's out of the 170 division. He's already had his run, got beat by Leon Edwards twice in a row, and decided to try his luck against Khamzat Chimaev, which is a tough fight. Now, Sean and Kamaru Usman coming together, I think, is the best culmination for their 185 championship run or their contendership in this particular weight class. Now, why? Why is that great? Well, for one, I got to tell you that it's a 50-50 matchup more so than in the first time around. Because now you got to wonder what kind of takedown defense does Sean Strickland have to offer when he is taking on someone like Kamaru Usman at this new weight class, right? Now, why was he taken down multiple times over and over again when he took on Kamaru Usman? Well, there's plenty of reasons for that, right? Let's take a look at the stats for the first fight. So Kamaru Usman was able to take him down twice. Sean stuffed 8 of them. Okay, and keep in mind, this is in the 170 division, the first time they had fought. So with that in mind, you got to think, right? Will Sean be a little more hydrated now that he's a 185er? But would Kamaru Usman be a lot stronger at 185? The striking percentage, I mean, Kamaru Usman's volume was way higher in the first fight. He threw 200 strikes in the first fight between them. And by the way, this was all the way back in April 8th, 2017, by the way. So that's literally like 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So 7-year anniversary next week of their particular fight. So that was 7 years ago this first fight happened. Kamaru Usman landed 117 strikes in that fight, a percentage of 58.5 percentage in the striking department. Sean was very low in his striking output in that, 108 strikes altogether. So again, Sean can be a very high volume puncher if he wants to, and it could potentially present many problems to Kamaru Usman moving into this new fight, new division, and the rematch that they're going to have in new circumstances. Imagine if this was a 5-round fight. Now, how would that look? Again, I think that this fight is a 50-50 fight, but let's talk about the real elephant in the room, right? We talked about the kicks and the punches that deal with these two guys in this particular matter at hand, right? Well, now let's talk about the business side of fighting, because Sean Strickland really wants to go and fight for the world title. You can't blame him. He wants to go out and fight for the world title because that fight with Dricus du Plessis was really close. Now, I urge you guys to take a look at the video that I had made with the announcement of Dricus du Plessis and Israel Adesanya, titled South African History X. It is literally located on the live section of this video if you guys want to check it out. I go into details about the history of South Africa, not only the history of South Africa, but also the history of these two gentlemen's documented beef that they have going on. And I think it's really interesting to sort of taking a look at that and understanding why, on the business side, a lot of people want to see that fight more than they want to see Sean Strickland fight for the rematch. Mike or Paul, my man. Mike or Paul in terms of Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul. Well, if it's a real fight, to be honest with you, I think that it's going to be Jake Paul. He's younger. Mike Tyson hasn't had a chin for a very long time. And anybody that thinks that Mike Tyson was going to win this fight is only looking at the static state of Mike Tyson in the 1980s rather than his current situation in the current moment of time. Which, by the way, Mike Tyson right now is a whole lot older, has really less of a chin than he did back in the days when he had left his previous professional career, where his chin was deteriorating, and you can't imagine that it's going to get any better by the time that he's 58 years old. Jake has been working on his craft. He's an up-and-coming boxer, as crazy as that sounds for many people out there to really digest that, but that's really what it is. Jake trains his craft, and there's only so long before you get better at what you do, and you're going to become a very dangerous matchup for somebody like Mike Tyson, who may be a legend, who has all these accolades, but the current static state that he's in terms of what he has going on with his condition as an old man, and the fact that we don't really know if he can really take a shot, and being that Jake is a hard hitter, it's going to be a lot more harder for Mike Tyson than what people would think. And obviously we're going to lean towards Jake. But with that said, I also made a video about that, going into details about whether this fight is an exhibition or a real fight. I urge you to check that out. I have it on my video section of this channel. It is called Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul will be an exhibition, and confirmed details. Right, I hope it's real, and I personally don't like Jake, but I'm right there with you when he's younger and hungrier. Yeah, a lot of people don't like Jake, and I'm going to tell you why. There's plenty of reasons why a lot of people don't like Jake. I think part of it is because of the personality that he has. He sort of lends himself as an unlikable character, so therefore it's easy to hate someone like Jake. At the same time, also, I'm going to be honest with you, right? A lot of people don't like rich white guys. That's just the God honest truth about it. The reason for that is because there's a lot of really disprivileged people out there, right? You see someone like Jake, you think to yourself, man, you know what? This guy, he's white, blonde-haired, blue eyes, and he's a winner in life. So therefore, it's easy to hate somebody like that. But the reality is, Jake has had a real hard life. And if you look into his life and the way that he grew up, the way that his father raised him, I think that a lot of you who are sort of based, or people that sort of lean towards having conservative ideals, would really respect how Jake grew up. And by the way, it's very contrasting to this Hollywood LA lifestyle that he has made for himself as a YouTube star, as a Vine star. But rather, I think that him going into the fight game really recharged himself into the reality that he wants to live. And what do I mean by that? Well, when you're in the world of YouTube, and he's mentioned this plenty of times, right? There's a certain aspect of fakeness that you have to exhibit in the world. I'm going to tell you, even myself, in all true to God honesty, there's certain times where I do turn it up, where I do act a certain way, where I do sort of create a certain character. A character, by the way, that's not too far-fetched from my reality, but a little bit exaggerated. So even with that, and in all honesty of everything that I'm speaking to you guys, there's a little bit of fakeness in that and a little bit of showmanship that you have to put on. In the fight game, you can choose to put on showmanship, or you can choose to just be a quiet fighter and let your work do the talking. And I think there's a part of Jake that wants to do that because, quite frankly, the way that his parents raised him, the way that his dad raised him, if you know anything about his dad, other than, of course, the weird stuff where his dad was made to kiss an underage girl on camera in one of Jake's videos that he had made back in the days, just for fun and banter's sake, but still distasteful to many people out there. Aside from that, Greg Paul is a based human being. The guy was a former soldier in the Army. He worked in construction, has a roofing license, now is a real estate agent. Does a lot of manly things, right? He goes out and he chops woods, he builds houses, he's the typical Midwestern American guy. And this is the type of father that Jake Paul and Logan Paul were raised under, right? So again, very contrasting to that particular life that we see him live as this Hollywood YouTube star, right? Especially in his LA days when they moved here from Ohio and whatnot. So, yes, I hope that answers your question with the Jake Paul and the Mike Tyson situation going on. And also, let's put this in perspective. These two guys are friends, right? And they're going into an exhibition. So whenever you have two friends going into an exhibition, it's very highly unlikely that the other guy is going to go for a knockout. For sure, Jake Paul is just going to go in there, dance around with Mike Tyson, and have a good old spar in front of the world and get a cash grab in the middle of it. As contrasting to, let's say, the situation with Vitor Belfort. Yeah, I'm a Midwest folk too, so that's why I don't get it. What don't you get? That he is the way that he is because he came from that type of background? Is that what you mean? Let me know what you mean by that. But to answer that, yeah, the reason why he had to be very contrasting to the conservative base roots that he had grown under was because, let's face it, right? When you're on YouTube, when you're in Hollywood, when you're in Disney, and let's not forget, yes, okay, so let's not forget, RJ, that when you are in YouTube, you have to put on a certain type of character. You have to put on a certain type of face in order to garner attention. So again, this is one of the things that Jake has mentioned. He said that it really tired him out to do all this fake stuff. With me, anything that I would do when it comes to putting it on for the camera or this and that, I don't think there would be any fatigue on my part because anything that I would do is not really that disconnected from my reality. For example, I had said yesterday on the live stream, right? Who am I? What is my background? And what can I offer to the world? Well, for example, I was born in Libya, one of the most violent countries in North Africa, if not the world. So, of course, a situation like that, I'm going to use that to my advantage. And then on top of that, I grew up in the East Coast, which is another violent part of America. And then here I am living in California, the capital of the gangbang, gangsterism of the world. Bloods, Crips, essays, Asians, just like the game Jay Sean Taylor mentioned in his rap song, right? And speaking of which, obviously I have that going on later on today. I'm going to have a video uploaded for the game Jay Sean Taylor going into the fight game, the rapper. He's going into the fight game, and I'm going to give you guys full details on that. That is going to be premiering 1 hour from now after I get done with this live stream. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'm going to continue on talking about Kamaru Usman and Sean Strickland and this upcoming matchup, which, by the way, Sean Strickland is refusing to take. Now, why is Sean Strickland refusing to take this? Simply because he wants that rematch with Dricus du Plessis. Hell yeah, brother, gangster, 100%. Yup. Or do you mean gangster as in the video that I'm about to put up, or gangster as in New Jersey? You agree that New Jersey and California are quite gangster. The Midwest too, obviously. That's something a lot of people don't take into consideration, is that There's a lot of gangs out there in Ohio, a lot of them in the South, and this and that. But obviously not in the same politics that you would have out here in California, where I mean the variations. You brother, thank you. Yes, maybe you know what? Maybe I should open up also an urban, like hip hop gangland channel of some sort as well. You separated from my mixed martial arts videos, but nonetheless, I do talk about a lot about that here as well, and the experience that many Californians go through in that particular politics of things. Speaking of gangs, and obviously we're in the subject of Sean Strickland. You guys know Sean Strickland was gang affiliated out here in California, and a lot of people don't really like to call it that for whatever reason that is. But listen, every race out here in California has a gang, and that includes all the skinheads and the white supremacists. But here's something that's really interesting about the particular gang that Sean Strickland was a part of, and it wasn't so much of a white nationalist movement, although there is elements of that. It wasn't so much of a skinhead movement, although there are elements of that. I got to tell you, when I first came out to California, oh yeah, awesome. You were really open-minded. Wow, I didn't know that about Sean. Yeah, Sean Strickland was a former skinhead, and he's mentioned this plenty of times. Even Israel Adesanya has referenced this in the press conference leading up to their fight, saying that, like, yeah, I think that Sean Strickland sort of accused Israel Adesanya of being a racist, and obviously Israel Adesanya fired back at Sean saying, well, you're the one that was part of a neo-Nazi gang, and that is true. Anybody that is in the know of the gang world of California knows this about Sean Strickland. He was basically Edward Norton from American History X, right? The real life version of that. And then eventually he came to his senses, started training with other athletes of different backgrounds. But here's something that I think is really interesting that you should know about the particular skinhead organization that Sean Strickland was a part of, right? Or just skinheads in general in California. You see, a lot of them are affiliated, get this, with Southern Mexican gangs, or also known as the Sureños. So they are in line with each other, right? And obviously the Sureños, a lot of them, not all of them, but many of them, they are in war and combat with a lot of black African-American gangs. And as you would imagine, obviously skinhead gangs are just not going to get along with black gangs. And you saw that in the American History X movie, right? Where Edward Norton was going to get robbed by these Crips that were in Venice Beach, right? After that basketball game that they had going on, where they made a bet, the white guys versus the black guys. If the white guys won, then they'd have to leave the beach. And so after defeating them, never would have guessed. What would you have never guessed? That the white supremacists here are affiliated with the Southern Mexican gangs? Yeah, I was very surprised by that as well. I got to tell you, I met some guys out here that were part of that organization, and they were friends with a lot of Mexican guys, a lot of Samoan guys, and even some black guys, because out here in California, the white gangs are a mixture of racist and non-racist people. Because guess what? Even if, let's say, you are an Eminem type of white guy, or a Paul Wall type of white guy, or the type of white guy that, let's say, is into hip-hop music, guess what? Very few black gangs are going to accept you. Obviously, there are exceptions to that rule. If you guys know anything about 1090 Jake, he's a blood from Boston. He's a white guy, but he's blood affiliated. And also this other YouTuber, his name is Milk74. He's part of the historic African-American gang known as the Hoover Crips down in Compton. And he's a white guy with French Dutch braids and all, right? Has the accent down and everything. But guys like that are very exceptionals to that rule, right? But for the majority of them, most people who join white gangs usually join because, let's say, they have to be locked up in prison. So as a result of being locked up in prison, well, you know, there's a lot of racial politics involved. But here's what's interesting about Sean Strickland, because I don't want to get off the topic of Sean Strickland, because obviously this is about him and his fight with the UFC and also his history. Sean Strickland, interestingly enough, as I mentioned, many white guys who joined white supremacist gangs out here in California, Sean Strickland joined this gang while he was on the streets as a teenager, which, by the way, if you do join these gangs at that particular setting of being in the streets and being of a certain age, then there is a high likely chance that you have a racist ideology of some sort, right? Whereas some guys that just get locked up in prison, they just join these guys based on protection. Whereas with Sean Strickland, his main prerogative of joining these guys was based upon voluntary measures, right? So that's something interesting to know. So going back to Sean Strickland and why he believes he deserves his title shot, you can argue that he does, because guess what? That fight with Dricus du Plessis was very close, very, very close, and many people can argue that he had won. I believe even Dana White himself said, or no, not Dana White, Joe Rogan may have said that he may have won that fight. Wow, did I just mix up Joe Rogan and Dana White? And by the way, did you guys see that video with Dana White? He was talking to, I believe, some YouTuber or some lady, right? And he called her. So what is it like to be Joe Rogan? This was like 2 hours after they had been talking for that amount of time, right? And Dana White laughs. He says, wow, you just mistaken me for Joe Rogan. By the way, Joe Rogan himself has been mistaken for Dana White plenty of times. I think he was the one who won, to be honest. Sean Strickland, yeah. I would disagree with that, though. I got to tell you. Oh, wait, but before I tell you why I disagree with that, I want to say, yeah, Joe Rogan once walked into a hotel and they thought he was Dana White. Somebody had mentioned, saying something to the effect of, yeah, that bald-headed UFC guy is here. I think that's Dana White. And I remember Joe Rogan telling that story. But yeah, back to Sean Strickland, why I think he lost that fight. Simply because he didn't have enough wrestling in that fight, right? And I urge you to also take a look at my South African History X live stream that I did, where I talk about the announcement of Israel Adesanya getting his fight with Dricus du Plessis in UFC 305 down in Perth, Australia. I go into details about their beef, why this fight is going to be a big marquee matchup. I even show some videos of the old fights that Dricus du Plessis has done. Some of the controversial fights that he's had, where this one guy was talking about his girlfriend in one of his South African fights. So really interesting. He's not a stranger. I'm talking about Dricus du Plessis. He's not a stranger to controversial fights and fights that have these crazy type of buildups and trash talking in between them. So he's very much well used to it. So look at that video for more further details. But as far as that fight goes with Dricus du Plessis, yeah, Dricus du Plessis, I believe, won that fight. So you think the other guy had more control per SE? What do you mean by SE? But yes, I believe that he had more control just because of the takedowns. Now look, a lot of people and many judges in the modern day of mixed martial arts, right? They're starting to score fights for guys that have no takedowns in a fight. This is a really interesting dynamic that I'm starting to notice in the modern space of mixed martial arts, right? They are starting to consider guys that have more striking and more damage. If you guys remember back in the days, George St. Pierre, when he fought Johnny Hendricks, I don't know how many times he took him down in that fight. I'm going to take a look at the stats for that fight, but I believe that the reason why GSP was able to win that fight was because of the fact that he may have had more takedowns than Johnny Hendricks. Let's take a look at. Okay, so quite even. Johnny Hendricks actually had 2 takedowns in that fight, but George St. Pierre had 3, and then in the last round of the 5th round, he was able to take him down, and I believe that really sealed the deal for the judges. Take a look at these punch stats right here, right? Johnny Hendricks had more total strikes landed on George St. Pierre, 142 out of 252. George St. Pierre, 125 out of 245. What does that tell you? That tells you that the judges did not care about you did not care about your striking. Whereas today you'll see many fights on the Apex centers and the prelims and the pay-per-views score it for the guy with the more strikings, the guy that scored the more strikings and the more damage. But again, a little bit different from back in the days than it is now in terms of the scoring criteria. So, with that in mind, with Dricus du Plessis, yeah, that's the reason why I thought Dricus du Plessis had won. But I'm an old school guy. I have a wrestling background myself, so maybe I'm going to have a little bit more bias towards the wrestlers as a result. Judges don't see punch stats. No, they don't. But what they see, I guess, is per round. They're like, okay, well, this guy did more damage to this guy, so we're going to give it to him as a result of that. But that's the reason why I believe that Dricus du Plessis had won. But yeah, gotcha. Either way, yeah, it's all subjective, right? The judges, they have a very difficult time judging fights. Just like this boxing match that I saw this weekend. Underrated opinion, CM Punk is the best UFC fighter of all time. I'm just kidding. Yeah. How about The Rock, right? Do you know anything about The Rock and his his shoe deal with the UFC? Now, what's strange about that is he makes these fighters wear his shoe, okay? But I don't know if he gives them any percentage and whatnot. And again, The Rock is, I don't know, man. You know what? I should make a video about The Rock. I don't think The Rock is really a good person, right? I think he's just another one of these Hollywood shills and this and that. I think there's a little bit of some fakeness in him. I'm gonna tell you why I think The Rock is fake a little bit. Remember when Nate Diaz said the shoes sucked? Oh yeah, I remember that. I remember when he said that the shoes sucked. Definitely. But he's not wrong. I mean, obviously, look, it's a subjective opinion, right? When we're talking about whether a shoe sucks or whether a shoe is no good or this and that. It's all subjective opinion, but either way, if you're going to make these fighters wear your shoe, you have to give them a certain good amount of percentage, but obviously he's not doing that because, look, The Rock is a fake person, okay? And again, Logan Paul is not any better, but let me tell you, when Logan Paul had that little controversy going on in Japan, right? He went and dropped Logan Paul like a bad habit. He said, I'm going to unfriend you on social media. Not only am I going to unfriend you on social media, I'm going to disown you. I'm not going to talk to you and this and that. It's just, this is a guy that doesn't have any loyalty, to any degree, right? Now, again, Logan Paul may not be the best person ever. Obviously, you know that he has a little bit of some controversies going on with the crypto scandals, right? He made people pay him to invest in his crypto, and nothing had came out of it, and he just basically screwed a lot of people out of his money. So he's not any better, right? But if I were Logan Paul's homie and I was his friend during that time, I would not go and abandon him like that, right? There's just no way. I don't do that, right? That's just not the type of culture that I come from, to where I'm going to abandon my friends because the world is canceling you. In fact, if the world is out canceling you, I'm going to double down and I'm going to help you as a result of that. Yeah, he's a scammer. RJ Human says he's a scammer, and I thought that he was the most disgusting, disrespectful thing that he did in the forest. Absolutely. That was absolutely horrific and disgusting. But I tell you what, and I'm a very honest and objective person, right? So if I'm going to tell you that I'm going to be biased for somebody because I trained with them or because I know this particular fighter, this and that, I'm going to disclose that. If I feel that I'm going to be honest about somebody because they're doing something wrong, I'm going to be honest about that too. So I'm going to be honest about this. If he was my homie, I would still support him, even as disgusting as that is, right? I would tell him behind closed doors, hey man, that's not cool what you did in Japan. That was totally uncalled for, and you had no right to do that. But in person and in the public, I would say, you know what? He's a good man. I know that he made some mistakes, but I'm going to ride with him till the end. And You don't get that type of loyalty anywhere else in the world. So, that's just the way that I am. That's just how I'm built. That's just the type of culture that I come from. If you come and ride with me, I'm going to ride for you till the wheels fall off. And that's just how we're going to get down with that business. You're going to try and help him on the low as a friend. Yes, that's exactly what I would do. I would help him on the low as a friend, but I would also, I would even tell the world, yeah, look, I'm helping this man. Look, I know that he did something wrong, but he's still my friend, and as human beings, we all make mistakes, and we can learn from them. Now, The Rock is not that kind of person. What The Rock thinks about is the constant bottom line. Even though the guy is already as popular and as powerful as he is, right? The guy doesn't care. He doesn't care that he's already popular and already powerful. He wants to constantly hold that spot, and he's going to do it to any degree. Whereas with Sean Strickland, and here's the thing, I got to tell you, I got into a little spat with Sean Strickland online before he was world champion, and this was back in 2019. And I'm going to tell you a story on this, right? And by the way, this is one of the reasons why many of my videos that I made about Sean Strickland have been very popular, because of this little spat that I had with him, especially when he beat Israel Adesanya. One of my biggest videos currently right now on my video section, if you guys want to check it out, on the popular section, one of them is the Sean Strickland reaction to how the UFC does not want him to be champion because he's bad for business. And by the way, here we are. This is a reason why they want to put him up against Kamaru Usman, because not only is Kamaru Usman a good 50-50 fight, much different fight than the first time around due to the weight that is now a little bit different from 170 going to 185, but also the circumstances where they're at in their career. But they also want to slow track Sean because they can't have him as world champion. But also with the accumulation of this big marquee matchup with Dricus du Plessis and Israel Adesanya and the racial implications behind that fight, which, as you know, all fights that have racial implications in them, especially in the world of boxing, but now more so in MMA, is really attractive for a lot of people. I know a lot of people don't like to hear that, but it really is. And yes, Sean was a former neo-Nazi and this and that, but a lot of people don't know that. There's people in this chat earlier that had no idea that Sean Strickland was part of a neo-Nazi gang. And quite frankly, it's because he hides it very well. And rightfully so, because he's not that guy anymore, right? So that's an aspect that, people don't know about Sean Strickland as a result of that, which is okay. It's fine, but again, people want controversy. Here's a South African guy, even though he was never part of any white nationalist group of any kind or anything like that. Do you think if Nate Diaz versus Leon Edwards fight was a Kumite match that Nate Diaz would have won? No. The reason why is because there's just a certain level of torque that Leon Edwards has, a certain level of explosivity that Nate Diaz doesn't have. And as a result, I think that even though Nate Diaz has rocked him in the last minute of that fifth round, obviously you've seen that Leon Edwards had recovered. But I think if it was the other reverse, if Leon Edwards was to rock Nate Diaz, I think that it would get to a point where Nate Diaz would go out just simply based on the firepower that Leon Edwards has over Nate Diaz. And I think that the reason why the Diaz brothers don't have a certain amount of firepower that, let's say, athletes like Leon Edwards have, or Kamaru Usman, or this and that, these guys, they don't do a lot of weight training, they don't do a lot of heavy lifting, and they also don't do a lot of explosive training. These guys are triathletes. Now, that's probably the reason why anybody could believe that, let's say, Nate Diaz has a chance in a Kumite no-limit fight, simply because the triathlete type of body can lend itself to that type of advantage, right? But sometimes all it takes is one firepower to really put you out of your misery, and that's that, right? Which, by the way, Dricus du Plessis is very much capable of that, right? That's the reason why he is who he is, and that's the reason why even if he makes mistakes in between the fights, he can still just eat veggies and train and smoke weed. Yeah, that's pretty much his main ethos and his main way of living, right? Just eat veggies. I don't know if he just eats veggies. I think he also eats fish, right? Now, again, that's still rich in protein, but in all honesty, I just don't think that it lends itself to giving you the firepower that you need. You look at a lot of wrestlers that in the past, present, and future, a lot of these guys eat meat. You're from the Midwest. You look at all the wrestlers that are from your part of the world. A lot of those guys are meat eaters, right? Now, obviously, there's the aspect of maybe eating too much meat can be detrimental to your health, right? Or sometimes even clog your intestines to a certain degree. Depending on what kind of body type you have, or depending on how your body responds to it, of course. But one can't argue that having meat and beef and all of that is really helpful to you as an athlete. And unfortunately, that's just not something that Nate Diaz has going on. So now with Chris Weidman, I want to talk about Chris Weidman and the controversial eye poke that he had going on, right? Chris Weidman accidentally poked Bruno Silva, right? And a lot of people are angry that Chris Weidman sort of celebrated the fact that he had won and this and that. But here's the reality of this, right? When you're a fighter, it's not up to you to decide that, you know what, I'm going to play fair, or I'm going to do the right thing, or this and that. It's really not about that, right? It's really not about you judging what is fair. It's about fighting for your best interest at heart. Okay, that's really the main thing about it. Why do I say that? The reason why is because you don't care what anybody else thinks. You're just there to win. Okay, now if you happen to win because you accidentally poked someone and the referee didn't see it, that's not your fault. If you accidentally hit someone with an illegal blow and the referee didn't see it and you got the finish, that's not your fault. You're there to fight. You're not there to decide how the fight goes. So for people to sort of slag Chris Weidman for celebrating, I think they just don't understand what it's like to be a fighter. I think they want to believe that every fighter is going to be objective. And hey, remember, I just said earlier that you know what? There's going to be times where I'm going to be biased towards other fighters that I may know. Like, for example, if there's some team alpha male guys that are fighting, or this and that, or guys that are from out here in Sacramento, like Anthony Hernandez or Max Griffin, or any of those guys that are from this part of the world, man, of course I'm going to be a little bit biased towards them, because obviously there's a regional proximity to these people. There's a close proximity with these people that I'm just going to naturally have a bias towards, right? Well, a lot of people who've never been around fighters, a lot of people who've never fought themselves, they're just not going to understand that. So that's the reason why a lot of people were slagging off Chris Weidman as a result. But going back to the Kamaru Usman fight and the Sean Strickland fight, I think that Sean Strickland eventually is going to cave in and take this fight when he starts realizing that the UFC is not going to give him a rematch against Dricus du Plessis. Now, is he eventually going to get a rematch? Absolutely. He will potentially get a rematch, especially if he beats Kamaru Usman. Now, here's the crazy thing about this, right? He has a good chance of beating Kamaru Usman. A very good chance. But what will happen if Kamaru Usman loses this fight? What is that now? That would be 3 fights in a row that he would lose. And I gotta tell you that is just really how the UFC is, right? And as fans, by the way, you should love this. And I know that that may be tragic for Kamaru Usman if he loses this fight, right? But think about it. He loses to Leon Edwards, who is on a hot streak right now and deserves to be champion just based on that performance that he had with him, the 2 championship fights. A vast improvement from the first fight that they had. But also, the second time around, he was able to persevere after getting beat like the first time with that head kick knockout. And in the third fight, he was able to adjust and really improve his game to the next level. And I'm talking about Leon Edwards. So there should be no shame in that loss. Now, after that, Kamaru Usman took on Khamzat Chimaev. And what happened? He lost. So when he lost, is it really that much of a shame losing to Khamzat Chimaev? No. But now you're coming in here against a former champion in a new weight class, a guy that you had previously beaten. Now, if he was to lose to Sean Strickland, is it really that shameful? Nah, not really. Not entirely shameful. Not at all. Not too much. Not too much. But it still looks bad. It still looks bad if he was to get that third loss, and I'm talking about Kamaru Usman if he was to lose to Sean Strickland. It looks bad, but it looks good on guess who? The UFC. It looks good on the UFC because the main ethos and the main bottom line of the UFC is this is where the best fight the best. Okay, they're not here to give you any easy matchups. They're not here to hold your hand. They're not here to give you layups or anything like that. And the same thing with Conor McGregor. By the way, this is the reason why Conor McGregor's entire career is being put on a halt right now. Why? Because Conor McGregor probably wants an easier matchup, and you're probably thinking, well, isn't Michael Chandler easy enough for him? Yes. At some point, when Conor McGregor was elite, Michael Chandler was a very easy fight for him. But I think the UFC is starting to realize that Conor McGregor is not training properly. They're also probably realizing that, man, every time we test this guy, cocaine is coming up in his system. By the way, I think you're allowed to consume this particular drug when you're not during your fight week. But still, they're looking at it and they're thinking, this is not going to look good for his training camp. Well, now I think they're really set in to have a training camp and they're really ready to put on a date with Conor McGregor. But I think that, man, I would be very reluctant to trust Conor McGregor going into this fight with Michael Chandler. Right? He just hasn't been training the same, and he wants easier matchups. And why I know this, remember that text message that was leaked between him and Dana White. He mentions that he wanted to fight Diego Sanchez. And what did Dana White say to him? No commission is going to allow that. But guess what? The casuals, they don't care. They know that Diego Sanchez is a big name, obviously. A very well-known name, but just was not in the proper career trajectory in his life at that time yet. He just wasn't really in the right state of where he could fight somebody like Conor McGregor. But for Conor McGregor, it was great for him to have a tune-up. Now, they don't want to give you tune-ups in the UFC, and that's why this Kamaru Usman and Sean Strickland fight is really great. But at the same time, the UFC doesn't also follow competitive architecture. Because just like what I had mentioned in that video, the live stream video that I did for Dricus du Plessis and Israel Adesanya, South Africa History X as it's titled, I had mentioned that how does it look for Israel Adesanya coming off of a loss and then getting a title shot? By the way, a title shot to a guy that he did not lose to, but a guy that had beaten the guy that beat him, which is Sean Strickland. So that's what's really strange about that particular fight. And again, as strange as it is, it's also a big money fight. Because can you imagine, why would you have Sean Strickland and Dricus du Plessis fight each other in Australia when you could put, what's his name, Israel Adesanya as the headline for that particular fight as a result? So let's take a look at the fights for this particular weekend that is coming up with Brandon Allen and Curtis, which, by the way, is a training partner of Sean Strickland. So they had fought previously back in 2021 of December. That was with the Jose Aldo and a Rob Font card, and that ended with Chris Curtis getting a second round TKO. Chris Curtis won that by a TKO. There were no takedowns in that fight. Obviously, the volume was on Chris Curtis's side. And let's take a look at where Brandon Allen has been since then, since after that fight, right? Because Brandon Allen is a guy that a lot of people are looking at right now as one of the top prospects, right? So look at this. After Sam Alvey, he beat Jacob Malkin, right? As you can see, Jacob Malkin this weekend had a great performance. Obviously, a little bit of a lackluster finish. His opponent sort of hit his head into his hips and kicked him on the ground. As a result, therefore, a finish is a finish nonetheless. Krzysztof Jotko, good win. Submission choke. Andre Muniz, another submission choke. So he's been rear naked choking guys after he had beaten Jacob Malkin. And then prior to that, Sam Alvey, he rear naked choked him. And Chris Curtis, he got knocked out by Chris Curtis as a result. And he was knocked out by Sean Strickland as well. Anthony Hernandez, he lost to a unanimous decision. And then he lost a decision to Eric Anders and was choked out by Trevin Giles. Get this, in Legacy FC in the regional circuits. So I could see Brendan Allen really improving his grappling going into this fight and potentially choking out Curtis Blades. But I do have a different take on that particular fight. Check out my video that I made, Road to UFC 300, where I basically broke down all the fights from the time of Tai Tuivasa and Myson Tybura all the way to UFC 300. I urge you to take a look at that video because, you know what, I like to do predictions ahead. I know a lot of people like to do fight predictions within that week. I like to do it ahead simply because I'm a smaller YouTube channel for the current moment of time, and I want to get as much views as I can ahead of time, before the fight comes and before it becomes irrelevant. So, of course, I'm going to do them way ahead of time. So if you want my prediction for all the fights from the Tai Tuivasa, Myson Tybura, all the way to UFC 300, I did all of that in that particular one video. So I have all my predictions and previews for that one, including the UFC 300 card. But let's take a look at who else is in this card, even though I have gone over it in the previous videos that I did. So that's going to be this weekend. And it's going to be an early start, by the way. That's always good. It's a 12 p.m. Start for Saturday. You got Nora Cornelli taking on Melissa Dixon. Cesar Almeida versus Dylan Butka in the middleweight division. Dan Aguirre taking on Jean Matsumoto in the bantamweight division. Piera Rodriguez taking on Sacramento's own Cynthia Calvillo. And Hector Viugo taking on Alan Telly, okay. And how about this? The return of the former 145 champion in the women's division, Germaine de Randamie, the cop from Holland. She's also a police officer while she competes in the UFC. And by the way, she's known for beating a man in a boxing match in Holland, which is interesting. Only the Dutch, I guess, would do that. The Russians do freak show matchups like that as well, the Japanese, but Nothing you would ever see in America. And how about this? Ultimate Fighter winner Court McGee taking on Alex Morono. That's going to be a good fight. And in the main card, you have Trevor Peek, lightweight division. Trevor Peek taking on Charlie Campbell. Lucas Bredsky taking on Walter, the undefeated heavyweight. That's going to be an interesting fight. Ignacio Bahamondes taking on Christoph Giagos. Morgan Cherry taking on Chepe Marceau. In the featherweight division, Alex Hernandez taking on David Jackson as the co-main event, and then Brendan Allen and Chris Curtis. And then a week after that, you have UFC 300. You got Justin Gaethje taking on Max Holloway. That's going to be a 5-round fight. And hi, Harris says hi. Hi, how are you? Don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out this content from the very beginning to the top, and check out all my videos. I have some real interesting content that you won't see anywhere else, and talk about MMA in ways that other people have never talked about, in different angles that a lot of people may not see, and also sort of add my own flair into it and whatnot. So don't forget to like and subscribe. So, bro, you are a non-playable character. You are a non-playable character. Thank you. I'm going to take that as a compliment. But you can emphasize and let me know exactly what you mean by a non-playable character. Do you mean that somebody that is, let's say, what do you call it, a bad guy or an antagonist in a video game or something like that? Or let me know what you mean by that. But that's a very interesting comment. But thank you nonetheless. I welcome all engagements and comments all the same. So Jamal Hill and Alex Pereira, I had talked about why this fight is important. It means you are special. Thank you. I try to be different in terms of how I approach MMA YouTubing. Obviously, a lot of people just like to approach MMA YouTubing in a very boring way, saying it was a compliment. Thank you, my brother. Thank you, Harris. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well. And thank you for your engagement. Yeah, so I try to be different. As you know, everybody in the MMA space, they just try to be the same. They try to just talk about the kicks and the punches, but I go way beyond that, right? I go into the political realms of these athletes. I go into the realms of, let's say, how these athletes behave, the psychology, also the geopolitics that is surrounding them, right? Especially if you want to talk about Khabib Nurmagomedov and the political implications that comes with coming from Russia. I talk and emphasize about that. I even talk about gang politics that revolves around California, considering that, by the way, my next video that is going to be uploaded at 9 p.m. today is going to be consistent of the rapper The Game set to enter the fight game, and I'm going to give you full details on that coming up at 20 minutes after I end this live stream. And yeah, I'm going to give you full details on that matter at hand. Don't forget to check out that video. It's a very short video, won't be too long, but either way, yes, thank you for the compliment. So, yes, what I was saying with the UFC 300 fight, right, with Alex Pereira and Jamal Hill, it's a very important fight because we really want to find out who is the true lineal 205 champion of the UFC, right? That belt has been passed around plenty of times before John Jones was champion, and John Jones dominated that particular division for a long time, only for John Jones to leave that division and for that belt to be passed around again over and over again, right? So we get a clear winner and a clear undisputed champion in that. And to be honest with you, I like Jamal Hill's chances in that. Weili Zhang taking on the other Chinese Yang in China versus China title fight. Justin Gaethje, Max Holloway. It's going to be a BMF title fight. Charles Oliveira versus Armin Sarukian. Really trying to figure out the old guard versus the new up-and-coming 155 contender. By the way, a guy who gave Islam Makhachev a great run for his money. And Bo Nickel opening up the card. How about this? This is really the most interesting part of this story, right? Bo Nickel, do you think Sean Strickland should get a rematch? Great question. I talked about that in this whole entire stream. Well, I don't know if I talked about it in detail. Do I believe that he deserves a rematch? Okay, so I don't think I talked about whether he deserves a rematch or not. I did talk about the implications of him potentially fighting Kamaru Usman and being passed up for a world championship fight, for a much more glamorous fight in Israel Adesanya and Dricus du Plessis. But to answer your question, Harris, does he deserve a rematch? My true to God honest answer, in all objectivity, yes. As a hardcore fan, and as somebody that enjoys the competitive architecture of what I had seen growing up in the wrestling departments, in the competitions of Taekwondo, and all of these competitive combat sports that I've done outside of MMA, yes, I believe that he deserves a rematch. But MMA is not an Olympic competitive architectural sport. He is my favorite fighter, and I think he deserves it. Well, great. If you think that he deserves it, and if he's your favorite fighter, then you're going to love my channel, because I have a lot of Sean Strickland content that, again, talks about his psychology, talks about his fighting style, and also I talk about my interactions that I had with him, which I think you're going to find very interesting, to say the very least. Okay, so yes, I believe he deserves a rematch, but on the business side of things, no. The reason being, and again, I'm talking as if I'm the UFC, not myself, right? As a fan and as an observer of the sport, and as somebody who respects the sport, I believe he does deserve the rematch. However, on the business side of somebody that advocates for the UFC, maybe not. Look, here's something about Sean Strickland, right? He's a very uncanny character, right? He is popular in the subculture of the MMA hardcore fan base. Why YDYM, he is a draw. He is a draw, but he's also a very controversial draw. He makes a lot of money for the UFC. Yes, he makes a lot of money for the UFC, but in a very controversial way, right? But I think that same controversy, when it comes to race and all of that, I think trumps over that, which is why I think the Dricus du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya fight is an even bigger fight. And I'm just speaking from a business sense, right? Sean Strickland can make money by himself. But I don't know if Sean Strickland and Dricus du Plessis together makes money. You understand what I'm saying? But if you put Dricus du Plessis, a white South African guy, taking on a black New Zealand Nigerian who has a problem with Dricus du Plessis saying he's the only African champion, boom! That makes money right there. So it's not that Sean doesn't make money for the UFC. He certainly does. The question is, does he make money together with Dricus du Plessis? And my humble, honest opinion, not as much as Israel Adesanya is to make money with the likes of Dricus du Plessis and the history that they have. And by the way, check out the video that I have on my live section, South African History X, where I preview the UFC 305 Perth card that is coming up with Dricus du Plessis and Israel Adesanya. But Izzy shouldn't get that fight. He lost to a guy who deserves it. And yes, I absolutely talked about that in this stream. If you want to rewind back later on after I'm done with this one, while also watching the premiere of Rapper the Game, set to enter the fight game, that is set to premiere in 15 minutes from now. So I'm going to be on this live stream for 15 minutes, and then also I'm going to get off so that you guys can watch the premiere of the game, set to enter the fight game, which is waiting on the right now on the premiere section of my video. So check that out. But yes, I agree with you. He deserves it. He deserves it. But I guess I'm talking like a Stockholm Syndrome victim when I say that, the UFC wants this fight to happen because obviously it's in Perth. It's going to feature Israel Adesanya, who is somewhat of a local in that part of the world. And Dricus du Plessis and him have this beef going on that I think is going to be a blockbuster hit. And that's where the UFC's mind is at. But Who do you think would win, Prime Nick Diaz or Sean Strickland? That's a very good. That's a very good matchup. You know what? It's a hard matchup, and I gotta tell you, I don't know if it's really fair to answer questions like this, right? Obviously, now, if we're talking about now, there is no way in absolute hell that Nate Diaz or Nick Diaz. Who did you say? Was it Nick or was it Nate? Let me look here. Nick Diaz. Okay, so the older brother. There's no way in heck that Nick Diaz would have a chance against Sean Strickland right now. With that said, it would be very difficult to be very honest about whether he could beat him or not. I said Prime Nick Diaz. No, I know. I saw it. I had to look at the comments myself. Yes. No, I'm going to say no. Only because of the fact that he can't beat him right now. So I don't see how he would beat him back then. And then plus, I think Sean Strickland just has a style that would be very difficult for Nick Diaz to deal with at any given time of his career. So my answer to that is no. I don't think that a prime Nick Diaz could beat Sean Strickland whatsoever. Also, I think they have a very similar style, right? But that style, Sean Strickland does a whole lot better, and the Philly shell that he has going on, I think, is really the best defensive mechanism in his fights. And guess what? Here's something about Nick Diaz: he was never a defensive wizard ever in his whole entire career. He never had this type of defensive prowess about him, but Sean Strickland does. This is why Sean Strickland constantly spars over and over and over and over again, right? Just like Billy Joe Saunders, the boxer in England, right? They say that he spars a lot, but I can see why. Because of his style, the type of style that Billy Joe Saunders has. He's very elusive, very defensive savvy. And if you are that, then it's, yeah, and they both have a good cardio. You could argue Nick Diaz has a better cardio just simply because of the fact that he has trained in triathlons. But here's something that's really interesting about that, right? The type of cardio that Nick Diaz has is not conducive to a 25 limit sport, which is why a lot of people say to the effect that, well, if this was a no limit fight, then Nick Diaz would, or Nate Diaz would, yes. What about Anderson versus Sean Strickland? Who would I pick for Anderson versus Sean Strickland? Harris asked. Anderson Silva. If you want to talk prime, Anderson Silva. But right now, obviously Sean Strickland, right? The age factor matters in that hand. So, yeah, that's something you definitely have to keep in mind, is that the age factor really factors in that particular instance. So, yeah, Sean Strickland would kill Anderson Silva. Although Anderson Silva didn't do too bad in the Jake Paul boxing match, if you remember, right? He did quite well. Quite well for his age. And remember, Jake Paul is a spring chicken. Prime Silva versus Strickland right now. Yeah, obviously, if Sean Strickland, and again, you know, I don't like these types of talks because they're very hypothetical, right? And it's almost like we would need a time machine to really make this happen. But obviously, there was nobody touching Prime Silva at the time. And you know what? It brings me to an interesting question in that aspect, right? Was Anderson Silva just dominant back then because of the fact that nobody else was dominant enough? Or had the type of skills to really match him? Or is it that he was just really that good? Also, you got to take into consideration the aspects of PEDs. Because remember, steroids were very rampant in the UFC back then, and they just, you know, they didn't have the strict drug testing that they do now. So for those of you that are on this chat right now, don't forget to like the stream, hit the like button. Also hit the share button, and also hit the subscription button so we can create visibility and make some noise in the world of MMA and create a new MMA community that talks with objectivity and who is your welterweight GOAT. Hands down, George St. Pierre. There's nobody that has done what George St. Pierre has done. And I think that Kamaru Usman was on a trajectory to sort of topple that particular notion of GSP, right? But even before that, Kamaru Usman had a loss in the regional scene that he's never avenged. So as a result, that in and of itself right there, you really have to give to GSP. What about Kamaru Usman? Yeah, Kamaru Usman, the fact that he did not have a loss that he was supposed to avenge, I think sort of played a factor into it, right? So that's something to take into consideration. Also, he's already lost, and GSP's never lost. Every fighter that he's lost to, GSP came back to beat them, right? So you really got to give it to George St. Pierre. George St. Pierre was a once-in-a-lifetime figure in mixed martial arts. I got to tell you, I think that he created the blueprint on how to really train for a proper training camp in mixed martial arts. I think if you talk about perfect preparation in mixed martial arts fighting, it is George St. Pierre. Faraz Zahabi, one of the best coaches of MMA of all time because of George St. Pierre. And obviously the other fighters that Faraz Zahabi had brought up afterwards sort of proved that. I think Kamaru Usman is a welterweight GOAT because his only losses in the UFC were against Leon and Khamzat. So in other words, what you're saying is that George St. Pierre did not have a harder competition than, let's say, Kamaru Usman. So you're saying that Kamaru Usman has had tougher competition than GSP? Maybe there's some arguments to that, right? Let's take a look at GSP's record, right? Because there were some big names that GSP had beaten all throughout his career. For example, let's take a look at some of the names that GSP fought bums. Well, in hindsight, they seem like bums, right? Like, for example, BJ Penn, he seems like a bum now, but he beat him in 2009. He also beat him back in 2006. So BJ Penn was no bum at that time. Josh Koscheck, you could argue he's a bum now, but that was back in 2007, and then he comes back and beats him again in 2010. Jake Shields definitely wasn't a bum. 25-2, 26-2. His 26th win was obviously against Michael Bisping when he won the middleweight championship, only to vacate it, and obviously it ushered in the era of Robert Whittaker, and then Robert Whittaker handed that era over to Israel Adesanya, and then after Israel Adesanya, then we have this mix and match turvy of a stacked 185 division. And by the way, yes, let me continue on with George St. Pierre before I go into that thought. Carlos Condit wasn't a bum back then. He was one of the best 170 guys in the world. Johnny Hendricks definitely wasn't a bum. Dan Hardy, where is Khabib in your GOAT list? Well, number 2, along with John Jones. Statistically speaking, right, you have to give it to him on that. I know he didn't have the most title defenses, but you also have to give context to that, right? The 155 division is a division full of killers. Oh, and the point that I was going to make earlier was that when Israel Adesanya started becoming the undisputed champion, many people just thought that this division was not as stacked as what, you know, they would have expected to be, simply because they thought Israel Adesanya, but he fought like 3 good guys. Which guy fought 3 good guys? So Israel Adesanya beat what do you call it? He beat everybody one-dimensionally, just using striking, right? So a lot of people didn't think that it was a stacked division. So I made a video on the video section months ago where I mentioned that the 1-8 Khabib, 3 guys. Okay, fair enough, yes. But again, you know, that's only because it's a very stacked division. And again, this is why this particular conversation is subjective. So I made a video basically talking about why the 185 division is the most stacked division while Israel Adesanya was champion. I urge you to take a look at that. It was a couple of months ago. Take a look on the video section. It's called 185, the most stacked division. And there were people on the comment section saying like, man, you know, this is not a stacked division. And then what happened? Sean Strickland came in and proved me right. You know, he proved me right. And then Dricus du Plessis came in and proved me right again. After Dricus du Plessis, who knows what's going to happen from here? And who knows? You know, he may not hold it any longer, or for all we know, Dricus du Plessis could potentially be the greatest 185 champion we may not have known yet. But yes, that's all relative in the context of subjective opinions when it comes to GOATs, and also when it comes to the certain level of competitions that you face. Because imagine, right? The only loss after he had lost his first title fight, I'm talking about George St. Pierre against Matt Hughes, only for him to come back and beat Matt Hughes again. After he beats Matt Hughes, then he loses to Matt Serra, only for him to come back and beat Matt Serra once again, right? But then after Matt Serra, GSP beats John Fitch, who was at his prime at the time, BJ Penn, who was also at his prime at the time. He beat BJ Penn while he was the 155 champion. So that was going to be the potential of BJ Penn doing what Conor McGregor did with a double championship. Thiago Alves. He beat Thiago Alves, was a prime at the time in his career. I think he got that win. He got that title fight at UFC 100 by beating Matt Hughes. Dan Hardy, who was a top contender at the time, right? The dark horse of that division. Josh Koscheck. And then Jake Shields, he was a former champion from a different organization to come into the UFC to set up a fight with him in GSP. Carlos Condit was also at the top of his game, nearly knocked out George St. Pierre in that. And then Nick Diaz, well, he was just a money fight, and then it ended with Johnny Hendricks. So, yeah, again, all relative in terms of competition. Now, imagine who is your top 5 of all time, bro. So, my top 5 of all time. This is a tough one. Okay. We'd have to go with John Jones, number 1. Number 2, we'd have to go with... No, scratch that. I'm going to give GSP, number 1. John Jones, number 2. Khabib, number 3. And then the next 2, it's going to be a little bit tougher. Number 2, I'll give it to Islam. And number 5... Ooh, this is a tough one. Number 5. Daniel Cormier. How about that, right? For top 5. So we got about a minute left now. The video that I have coming up, the game set to enter the fight game, is coming up right now. Go check it out, guys. It is 9 p.m. right now, so I'm going to stay with you guys up until this particular content is uploaded. Well, it's uploaded already, but it is set to premiere. Here it is, right here. So Harris's top 5. Before I go, it is, you guys hear the little premiere sound. Who is his top 5? Sorry, that was awful. Let me see. Number 1, John Jones. 2, GSP. 3, Silva. 4, DC. 5, Mighty Mouse. Man, how could I forget about Mighty Mouse? I should have thrown him in there. Again, this is why this conversation is interesting, right? It's subjective by its nature, but it is what it is. So we are right now at the countdown. Go to my video section right now. It is premiering. The Rapper, the game set to enter the fight game. Go to my video section, like and subscribe, and watch that video right now. It is coming in 105, 104, 103, 102. I'm going to show you guys a little countdown that I have going. See? Go check out that video right now, guys. It is less than 1 minute now, the countdown for my premiere video. 45 seconds. 44 seconds. Come on, guys. Come and watch that video right now. And hit the like button. Share. Tell a friend to tell a friend. And I will see you guys in 30 seconds with the premiere of my video. 25, 24, 23. And the countdown begins. Go to my video premiere. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. I will see you guys in the next live stream. Don't forget to check out my premiere right now.